Studios to the Brooklyn Nets post-game show alongside Frank Isola. I'm Chris Sheeran. Frank, down by 3 at the break where the Nets 59-56 to a very tough Philadelphia 76ers team. Again, no KD, no Kyrie. Nets bench kept him in that second quarter. Yeah. You mentioned it, outscoring the Sixers 16-14 over that stretch, but it was that stretch in the third quarter that did the Nets in tonight.
Yeah, the turnovers were a problem, transition defense. You give up 43 points in the quarter when you don't have the offensive firepower with Kevin Durant missing, Kyrie Irving missing. Very tough to overcome that. What was interesting, in the fourth quarter, they were down 15, 5:45 to go. Joel Embiid checked back into the game. James Harden did not. He did not play at all in the fourth quarter. So if you're Steve Nash, are you monitoring minutes right there? Or are you thinking maybe we'll take a run at it with 5:45 to go, only down 15? He decided to pull the plug at that moment.
Well, maybe we'll hear from Steve Nash about James Harden in the postgame when we hear from the head coach. But let's talk about that 5 minutes, Frank, and let's show that last 5 minutes from the third quarter. And this is where it all kind of went haywire for Brooklyn, but it started good as Danny Green, Frank, gets teed up here after not getting the foul call that he thought he deserved with Landry Shamet running into him.
And Shamet kind of hesitated, expecting there to be a foul call right there. Nothing was called. Technical foul on Danny Green for complaining. Then the next couple of times down the court, after James Harden had tied it at 79, Danny Green starts knocking down a couple of wide-open corner threes, and this is when the Sixers started running away with it. In the last 4:56 of the quarter, the Philadelphia 76ers scored 23 points, and that really was your game right there. And how about that play with Embiid? He goes for the rebound. I understand he's a lot bigger than Tyler Johnson, but that is an absolute foul, and Tyler Johnson falls into DeAndre Jordan's leg. Right. Could be a dangerous situation.
And DeAndre Jordan would leave the game there too, and then Ben Simmons would get teed up after he throws down the dunk here. And he gets teed up after yelling at Tyler Johnson. In the end of the quarter, Jeff Green with the inbounds pass there, and it goes by James Harden, and Embiid gets fouled by Norvel Pell. And just an awful end to that third.
And although you could tell right away that it was a foul before the buzzer sounded, the referees needed to look at that for some reason for about 5 minutes. I don't know what was going on at that point. It was clearly a foul. It's unfortunate, not a good play by Norvel Pell, but he fouled Embiid. That third quarter was a disaster for the Nets. And Ben Simmons getting a little nasty with Tyler Johnson. Tyler Johnson isn't supposed to hustle back on defense and try to make a play?
Well, you said
what's wrong with that?
As we were watching the game, you said that, and that's
competing.
Exactly right. Yes.
What's wrong with that?
Absolutely. But 23-7 run by the Philadelphia 76ers over the last 5:01 of that third quarter, and that was the decisive moment in this game.
It really was. And again, the Nets have had a bunch of these quarters. Go back to the Washington game last week with the 48 points that they gave up in the fourth quarter. You're giving up 40-plus points. It is so difficult to win games. And at least that night against Washington, you had Kevin Durant. You had Kyrie Irving. They weren't available tonight, and that's why at the start of the fourth quarter, Harden didn't play. And because the Nets couldn't make it close, that was it for James Harden. 40 minutes last night, 29 minutes tonight.
Just a third of the big three was in action tonight, as we mentioned, and James Harden tried his best tonight, but the Nets just fall short. Harden did everything he could. As you mentioned, Frank didn't play in the fourth quarter, but was 2 rebounds shy of his 5th triple-double of the season. He only had 4 last season.
And you were talking about this while we were watching the game. Because the Nets do have a couple of back-to-backs this week, including, of course, the game where they go to Detroit, then home against Indiana, then they head out to the West Coast. So Steve Nash is probably figuring, you know what? James Harden played a lot last night. He's obviously giving it his all tonight, so don't put him back in the game. Like, again, he only played 29 minutes.
And you would have to understand that with the back-to-back, I know it doesn't start until Tuesday and Wednesday, but it's in Detroit. You don't know if Kyrie is going to be back with the team. Steve Nash did say pregame that he was hoping to have Kyrie back, but his finger was swollen. We're not going to know until that game happens if he's back. But Kevin Durant is out until next Friday, so why not give Harden that extra time, Frank?
Well, that's what Steve Nash had to decide. At 5:45 to go in the fourth quarter, they're down 15. Again, Doc Rivers decided to put Embiid back in the game. Ben Simmons was in the game. Steve Nash could have said, you know what, I'll take one more run at it, but I think at that point he decided that's it. He's played a lot of minutes. Hopefully someone will ask Steve Nash about that after the game. Think about this, though. Harden in the first half, when he didn't play that first 7 minutes of the second quarter, the Nets actually outscored Philadelphia 16-14. Him sitting in the fourth quarter, the score was 22-22. So they actually outscored Philadelphia by 2 when Harden wasn't in the game.
And now Philadelphia, over the last 2 seasons up until this point, they are 40-4, as you see right there at home. There's 4 teams that walked out of Philly the past 2 seasons with wins: Denver, Portland, Miami, and Dallas. They have that 17-7 record, which is the best in the Eastern Conference, and 7 players, Frank, in double digits for Philly.
And Ben Simmons, as we know, is outstanding. He can get to the basket, takes a couple of dribbles, and he's from the three-point line right at the rim. And this is the issue the Nets will have if they meet up with Philadelphia in the playoffs, which is possible. Philadelphia right now has the best record. A lot of people still think that the Nets are the best team. Embiid is an absolute load. The Nets have to figure out a way to guard him. Now, Philadelphia still hasn't played against Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. So if the Nets get all those 3 guys together and they're playing Philly, that's a different story. But Joel Embiid will be a problem for the Brooklyn Nets.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see when the Nets are fully healthy and they meet up with the Philadelphia